heard of it either. But I thought it was kind of a neat marketing strategy that she used to use that term. But she was talking about, as I was listening to her, she was talking about some of the setbacks in her life and how she came out of those setbacks, and she was encouraging other women to let them know that they could come out of their setbacks and the things that happened to them in their lives as well. And so I didn't realize it then, but what she was essentially talking about was resilience. And so I'm going to define that for you today when we talk about resilience, what that actually means. So I'm going to read a formal definition from the American Psychological Association, and I want you to pay attention to some of the wording in here. So resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. It means bouncing back from difficult experiences. So there were some things that I highlighted in that definition. One of the words I highlighted was process. And I'm someone who definitely likes to get audience participation, so I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm going to ask just a few people, if you wouldn't mind. Why do you think I highlighted process when talking about resilience? What are your thoughts about that, Rachel?
I think it's because resilience happens over time. It's not just like at a point, or maybe it could be, but generally it happens over a period of time.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts about that?
I was going to say something, it's ongoing, so it's ongoing.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else want to share what they think about why underlying process? Well, definitely for that time factor, that it is a process, it's ongoing, it takes time. I really wanted to stress that. I think a lot of the times when we think of resilience or when we think of bouncing back, we want to bounce back immediately. Like something happens, it's like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not back to normal, right? So I like to use the rubber band, or I actually recently thought of a rubber band analogy versus an accordion. So with the rubber band, you pop a rubber band and it goes back to its shape almost immediately. Whereas an accordion, if you think about, visually an accordion, takes some manipulation to get it back to its, regular state. So, maybe in thinking about resilience, thinking of it as a process versus, just snapping back immediately. Another thing that I wanted to sort of highlight, I don't know if anybody watched the Democratic debates, the most recent ones. There was on CNN, there were the people that are still standing. So there was some talk about, one of the questions they asked them was, what are some, tell us about a time when you demonstrated professional resilience or resilience in your professional career. I don't know if you remember that question, but that really stood out to me because I feel like some of the ways people responded, it was really personal, and they shared, some of their journeys and their trials. And I think that was a really good illustration of people talking about resilience. Okay, so adversity. So one of the phrases used in the definition of resilience was talking about adversity. We're adapting well to adversity, adverse situations. So when we think about adversity, we think about things that, situational stressors, things that happen to us, family and relationship problems, health issues, workplace stressors. Anybody want to throw out any other things that could be an example of adversity, things that happen to us in our lives? Anything?
Does somebody say that?
Death, yeah, that's not up there, but yes. Loss of a loved one. Addition to a family. That could present some adversity. That's true. Very true. Yeah, so, the list could go on and on. Just wanted to point those things out to kind of bring it home. Okay, so now let's talk about stress because there is a link. So, stress has been sort of kind of hard to sort of narrow down, like a really formal definition, but this is kind of what we've come up with over the years. So starting with the endocrinologist Hans Selye, he defines it specifically, in 1936 he defined it as the non-specific response of the body to any demand for change. So that's a pretty simplistic definition, but that was the initial working definition. Later, the physiologist and psychologist Mason and Lazarus, those two individuals, took it a step further to say that stress is actually a psychological process. Okay, and that involves an individual's appraisal of a situation, whether or not they appraise a situation as threatening. And when someone appraises a situation as threatening, it has to do with the resources that they have them perceiving that the demands of the situation exceed the amount of resources that they have to actually deal with the situation. So a nice way of simplistically looking at this is to have this little equation here. If the demands are greater than the resources that the individual possesses, it's going to equal a stress response. They're going to feel stressed out. And when we talk about that kind of stress, the stress that's associated with the first equation, we're talking about negative stress. We're talking about de-stress. Okay, and I'll talk about the difference between negative and positive stress in a second. The second equation that talks about how the demands are equal to the resources required is perceived as a challenge. So that demands equals resources equals challenge. There's a different sort of connotation to challenge, right, versus stress. And so challenge is more of a positive sort of stress, right, or eustress. And so I'll break that down in the next slide. Okay, so again, eustress is positive stress. It tends to motivate us, focus us. It can help us, help increase our performance, enhance our performance. De-stress, however, it doesn't feel good. It's uncomfortable. It can decrease our performance. And
Personnel.
okay, personnel. Okay. All right. I thought I had to try to say it over the top of my head. I was like, okay. It can be long or short term. When you think of eustress, it's usually a short term sort of situation. And then with de-stress, it can be long or short term. De-stress can lead to mental health and physical problems, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second. Can anyone think of positive stressful experiences?
Wedding planning,
Sort of, right? Sort of. Are you in the midst of wedding planning?
Not anymore.
Oh, okay.
July 20th.
Okay, July 20th. All right. Well, yes, wedding planning can certainly be a eustress sort of experience. Any other thoughts?
A new baby.
A new job.
A new job, a new baby, a new job. Yes, yes, and yes. Right. So short term, motivates, focuses, positive, can improve your performance. So yeah, thank you, ladies. All right. So the impact of stress. So there are several impacts of stress on the human body. It can certainly impact us physically and physiologically. As you all know, there are hormones, the stress hormones that are released in our bodies when we're experiencing stress. How our bodies actually respond. So, some people have GI issues, headaches, respiratory problems, problems breathing, getting sweaty palms. It can be a really big deal on us physically. I also have a handout about how our stress affects our physical health. That might be helpful. Stress can also impact us cognitively. So cognitively is, kind of how we think and what we think. When we're stressed out, we can overthink. We can also think negatively. Our cognitive functioning as well can be impacted. So, our concentration, our memory can be negatively impacted by stress. Emotionally, which is the third level that stress can impact us, is through anxiety and depression. So, those are, clinical, mental health issues that stress can contribute to and lead to. Okay, so stressors. I think I used that term pretty loosely just a second ago, but that's basically any event or stimulus that triggers a stress response. So, for example, getting married, like a wedding, planning a wedding, that's a stressor. Again, it could be a good stressor. Losing a loved one, that can be de-stressing. And so the actual event is what the stressor is. Okay, so now we get into ways we can actually build resilience, and I do have a handout on this, but we'll talk from here for right now. So making connections, and these are taken from the American Psychological Association. Again, they're a great resource. They do a lot of research and studies to get the information that we have. So making connections is big, family and friends. Social support is implicated in a lot of positive outcomes, right? So a lot of positive outcomes associated with social support. It can really help, with mental health issues when you have the social support that you need. There are positive outcomes associated with that. So family and friends, faith-based groups, we're talking about church and other faith-based groups, other groups or organizations, phenomenal women, this is a big source of social support, so thank you, Danielle. Another way to build resilience is to shift your perspective. So remember, we talked about how stress and other things associated with stress, we talked about adversity and traumas and things like that. So part of that is shifting our perspective, because the cognitive part of the way that stress impacts us is at key here, or at play here. So shifting perspective, what can I control? I think a lot of times we can perceive, our perceptions can be off, right? With stress, we can think about a situation being insurmountable, or we can't get over it. There's no way we're going to solve this issue. So we need to look at what we can control. So yeah, there are some things that are out of our control, but what can we control? And looking at that. Let's see, keep things in perspective. So in the right perspective, in the grand scheme of things, is this particular situation, horrible, And so really trying to keep things into perspective. Accepting that change is a part of living. I think Danielle actually touched on this when she opened up. As long as we're breathing and waking up each day, change is going to be a part of our experience. And so acknowledging that things don't stay the same can be helpful as you try to build resilience. Moving towards your goals is another important part of it, even coming up with goals. I think a lot of the times when we're dealing with something, it's hard to move forward, and a lot of us, get stuck. So it's important that we have goals and try to move towards them. Small, realistic goals, right? And moving towards those. Taking decisive actions. So it can be very tempting to be complacent when we go through things, just be like, what's the point? It is what it is. Or just avoid doing certain things. Let's caution against that and try to decide, what can I do? What small steps can I do today to move me towards, where I want to be? Look for opportunities for self-discovery. This is really important. A lot of times when we go through things, and again, when I say go through things, difficulties, losses, tragedies, crises, major stressors, what did I learn about myself? That's a really good question, an important question that, you can ask yourself. What did I learn about me in this process? Nurture a positive view of yourself. A lot of times when things happen, we immediately start beating up on ourselves and engage in negative self-talk. I'm a horrible person. How could I let this happen? I did something wrong. Whatever the case may be. It's very important during that time to nurture a very positive view of yourself, or be self-compassionate. You'll hear that word or that phrase in mental health, probably self-compassion. Maintaining a hopeful outlook. It's a lot of times when people are dealing with depression or other mental health concerns, there's no hope, right? The suicide rate is crazy, and a lot of times those individuals in those situations don't have hope. They have a very hopeless, things will never get better. And so it's important in resilience to maintain a hopeful outlook. Taking care of yourself is important. Physically taking care of yourself. So we're talking about exercise, eating right, the things that you all are probably very much aware of. The emotional part of that, if you do need mental health treatment or help, not being afraid to reach out or asking someone who may know. Like, I'm a resource. I don't know if any of you know mental health people, but hey, I'm here today, so hopefully I'm not intimidating. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them, and I can be a resource to facilitate you getting, the help that you may need. And again, you don't have to be. I think sometimes there's a misconception that you really have to be really down and out to see a mental health provider, but that's not the case. And you might just want to, make sure that you're doing all right, or you might want help with a goal that you're trying to attain. And having a mental health provider can be helpful for you in doing that. Let's see, spiritual, taking care of yourself spiritually. So again, that could be being a part of a faith-based community. It could be, doing more solo practices, meditation, things of that nature. That can be all part of your spiritual health. Staying flexible. Again, talked about self-compassion, allowing yourself to feel strong emotions. I think a lot of times we censor ourselves and we say, oh no, I shouldn't feel like this strong sense of anger, you know, I mean, you know, that's what you do with the anger is what's, you know, important. But the fact that you feel angry or really sad or, you know, really excited or nervous, you know, allowing yourself to experience the range of emotions that you may experience after a loss or after something difficult that requires resilience. Let's see, getting help. So the final thing is getting help. So again, there's therapists, but therapists aren't the only people that, you know, need to be a part of your community or your village, right? So clergy, friends and family is big. It's really important to have friends and family in your circle that can help you as you walk through the process of resilience. Okay, so I don't know if I should just go ahead and hand what I have out, but these are the ones I definitely want everyone to have. On this is actually what I just said, you know, the tips for building resilience, which again are given by the American Psych Association. And then on the back are actually resources for therapists. So there's some websites that you can go to, psychologytoday.com, Therapy for Black Girls, maybe some of you have heard of that one, AAC.net. That's actually a Christian-based organization if you're looking for a Christian counselor. I have my website on there if you want to learn more information about me or if you want to book an appointment. It's fine. Crises, I provide the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, as well as the number, mobile crisis for Prince George's County and domestic violence website. So that's all on this page. So if we could, I can pass it out, or I can, if you could get one, helpful. And then the other handout